this topic is a little heavier than the previous topic. And we have a lot of people that are entering the conversation when it comes to ASD's budget. And I know there are a lot of questions and there are a lot of concerns. There are probably over 100 people in the room right now that have a lot of questions. They have looks of inquiry, perhaps concern, perhaps frustration. So I think I owe it to the public to explain what is going on, what are the next steps, and what can I do as an individual to help advocate for my child. That's what I'm hearing that families need right now. We're in a lot of pain, and I hope that I can help fill you in on where we're at and what we can do to support our kids. So let me just take a step back. So what we're talking about is the financial health of ASD, and I want to take us back to what's going on. The top line problem is that ASD is in about $100+ million structural deficit. I use that term structural very intentionally because that means that our known revenues do not match with our known expenses. With that said, you may have recalled in the past ASD has had budget issues and somehow we get through it. So what's the disconnect here? It's that word structural. So there have been levers that the district's been able to pull off in the past. You may recall that there was a large federal infusion of dollars just a few years ago through COVID relief. That was a huge benefit to ASD and districts across the state, and frankly, districts across the entire country. And in Alaska specifically, it gave us an opportunity to mask a real problem because of such a huge infusion of dollars. We were able to get through those 3 years with very little fanfare. But as you know, we're beyond the COVID dollars. That spend down was a while back, and we no longer have that lever. The other thing that we've done to mask these structural deficits is to constantly reinvest what we call our fund balance. Our fund balance is essentially an emergency savings account. The financial people don't like it when I use that term, but to think about it as an individual, it really is a savings account. So it's used for emergencies. So think about a natural event like an earthquake. Those are the dollars that you'd use for that. ASD, as we shared earlier today, is in a fully funded health plan. So we need to pay for healthcare claims. And there is a very strong business rationale to maintain anywhere from 8 to 12% fund balance. But the fact is that ASD for 2 years in a row has had to spend our fund balance down to 5%. What does 5% mean? 5% means about 2 weeks worth of our operating expenses. So essentially, our piggy bank only has 2 weeks worth of expenses. So we've spent down our fund balance, we've spent down our ESSER money. What are some other ways that we can tackle this crisis to really minimize the impact to our students? And of course, a common thing that comes up would be administrative expenses. And I'll definitely kind of peel back the curtain a little bit. ASD has been in structural deficits for a really long time. So as I look through the books of historical trends in administration, I've seen that we've actually made a lot of cuts going all the way back to 2012. So when you compare the year 2012 to today, when it comes to what we call administrative expenses for the district, I noticed that our chief financial officer's office has shrunk by half since 2012. Our communications office is down a third, 33%, since 2012. Our budget office down 33%. Our purchasing/procurement office down 30%. Even departments that theoretically we should be investing in because they can help us have long-term gains, such as the development and grants department, that's been slashed by 33% since 2012. Assessments, the folks that help us analyze our data to administer assessments across our 100+ buildings, down 17%. Another area that's not administrative, but is also an expense that districts have is around maintenance. Is there some way that we can minimize the number of custodians or maintenance contracts or something? Since 2012, we've slashed that by about 14%. And frankly, we're at the point to where there's not a whole lot of fat left in the maintenance department, especially every day that passes, the volcano's on my mind. And those are the very people that are going to make sure that our vents are closed and that our people are safe. And we have these types of things that happen every year. So I have huge concerns about our maintenance department. But even vehicle maintenance, down 38%. Things that were once luxuries that you think might be fat that are out there that we could have cut. One example that comes to mind would be project management. There is a role for project managers in that they help you take, a huge initiative like a school start time change from A to B. But you see, even there, that's down 70% or 77% since 2012. So there's really not a whole lot of that left in the district other than for core district initiatives. So we've looked at this administrative piece for quite a long time. And as it stands, ASD's administrative expenses are about 6%. You may be wondering, is that a lot for a district or is that a little? Like, where do we stand? So I asked my chief financial officer to do an analysis for fiscal year 2025. And I was actually pleasantly surprised that for fiscal year 2025, ASD was actually leading the top 5 biggest districts in the state for leanest administrative offices. And you might be wondering why. It actually makes a lot of sense when you think about it, because whether you have 50 schools or 100 schools, there are some economies of scale, is the academic term really used to describe some of the advantages of having so many buildings, but only one district administration. So we were actually among the top 4 statewide in district administration at about, a little over 5%. And of course, even this year, despite all of those reductions that happened before 2012 to today, you better believe that that was the first thing that we looked at before we started looking at class sizes. It's been an exercise of multiple months going line by line, department by department, and really trying to make reductions that are intentional but will minimize the harm. Because believe it or not, some of these offices that may be administrative in nature do fulfill core duties, whether it's writing the checks that we give to our employees, or those that advise employees on their benefits, to those that investigate student issues that happen in buildings. There are core functions that we have to maintain, and I worry about the impact of continuing to slash away at that. But let's zoom out even beyond that. Like, how does the administrative costs relate to the actual layout of the district's budget? What is the percent? So again, the percent administration is about 5%. That's around it looks like $33 million, but our structural deficit is 110, right? So even if we fired myself and everybody who works for me and got rid of every single school board member and everything but beneath that, we still would have had 77 million more dollars to go. So I hope that helps describe the magnitude of the numbers that we're talking about and why this is a huge issue. So with that said, what is the role of the school board versus the role of the legislature? So the school board and myself, our goal is to take the amount of dollars that's laid out in statute and we assign it to schools and departments and other areas within the district. We essentially move money around, but we don't print money. And neither does the state legislature, to be clear. But what the state legislature can do is allocate dollars for school districts. In fact, that in the Alaska Constitution is not just something that they can choose to do. It's actually their constitutional obligation. So here's the problem. The problem is that the base dollar per student investment has not meaningfully increased in 10 years. If you want to know how much the per student funding formula has increased, only $30 per kid in 10 years. You may be wondering, is that a lot? Is that a little? I think the parents in the room realize that that's laughable, because when you think about the cost of food for our children these days, the cost of fuel to take these children to school these days, we think about the rising costs of, car insurance and healthcare. Those same inflationary pressures impact ASD too. And that's why we're here today, because of 10 years of kicking the can. To be frank, the can is now kicking the legislature right back. And there's a lot that's going on as a result of 10 years of a lack of political will to do something about this issue. And again, my belief is that the solution is legislative. Here, we make operational decisions, but at the legislative level, they are really the ones that can make the difference as to whether or not ASD will have to absorb a 20% cut, because right now that's the reality. They're asking districts to cut their budgets by 20% from what it was last year. And right now, they've not passed a bill. They said they're trying, they're not quite there yet. The governor doesn't seem pleased with the state of affairs when it comes to school funding bills for various reasons that he can explain himself. But the bottom line is that we're not where we need to be, and we're in nearly a state of emergency. So let's talk about what happened because of the state of affairs. Because we were in this 10-year kind of holding pattern of funding being held flat with the occasional one-time funding that you can't count on, we're back to square one again. So for example, last year, the legislature did adopt a one-time 20% increase to school funding. That funding is now gone. And now districts are back to square one again, having to make those cuts all over again. And that's why we're in this vicious cycle of having to make reductions year after year after year. And we keep on doing the same thing up here, and the legislature keeps on doing the same thing up there. And something has to give in order to move a couple of steps forward. So that was the high level how we got here. But now, what is actually happening in our schools right now? So, in order to make our budget balanced, and it is not an option for the ASD board to pass a balanced budget or not. We know how much money that we're guaranteed based off of what's in statute, and that's what we use to create a balanced budget for this year. But again, we're grappling with a 20% reduction to our revenue. And I had mentioned that administration is only 5%. So mathematically, there was no way for these cuts to not touch our buildings. And that's why this is such an emotional process for everybody involved, from the superintendent to the school board members to the staff to the families to the students. And that's why it breaks our heart to be in this position yet again for yet another year. And the latest development in this process was, unfortunately, to balance our budget after cutting all of this administration, after cutting operations, after trying to find whatever mechanism we could to save whatever money we could, we still had to make the difficult choice to increase class sizes by 4. It's called our pupil to teacher ratio. So it's not quite a apple to apple for class size, but indulge me here. Essentially, class sizes are rising by 4 students. And that's why we're at what we're calling the teacher displacement process. What does it mean if ASD added a +4 PTR? What does that mean in terms of me as a parent? What that means to you as a parent is that ASD will have 380 fewer teachers than we had at the beginning of the school year, effective next year. That is daunting. There's no way around really having a negative impact on the student experience when you reduce the number of teachers by 380 people. That's terrible. And that said, that's part of the process of trying to balance a budget when the state is saying, make it work with 20% less. So we had to make that terrible decision, but now there's a ripple effect. So now you have all of these teachers that are in their schools in positions that we don't have the funding to keep for another year. So the reason why so many teachers are moving around right now is not because it's some sort of twisted game. It's this sad reality that school districts must provide teachers as much time as possible to know what their new position will be in a position that we can budget. So with that said, what are the state of affairs? You may know your individual school situation, but what's happening district-wide? Because the numbers will astound you. So in ASD, we had to eliminate 380 teaching positions in our budget. Right. So that means as when you do the math, that means about 185 teachers were told they needed to move to a different position. So that creates a domino effect. And then when we do the math, when you add +4 to class sizes, what are the baseline number of positions that we need to ensure that students get math and writing and English, their core statutory requirements? And it turns out that we have about 167 or so positions for those 184 teachers that are being moved around. So for ASD, the good news is that I don't anticipate we'll have very many layoffs, but the bad news is that if the legislature does not act now, we are in danger of not being able to staff our teaching positions on the first day of school, even if we got the money. And now let me pivot to my next part of what I want to talk about, which is the fact that this is a statewide emergency. As the ASD superintendent, I can tell you that there are very reasonable people out there that always have skepticism about ASD. And maybe there's some sort of accounting error. Maybe there's something very specific to the governance of ASD that's making this happen. I'm telling you, this is a real issue. You don't have to take my word for it. Look up some of this stuff. I was just reading in the paper today that in Kenai, they're going to have to reduce 160 teachers. So at the end of this year, Kenai School District will have 160 fewer teachers than they had at the beginning of the school year. I went ahead and looked up the numbers for Matsu, right? Because a lot of people think that this is an ASD specific thing. So what's happening next door at Matsu? If they don't pass a base student allocation increase, they will lose 120 teachers in Matsu. So let's do the math here. We're losing 380 teachers in Anchorage. We're losing 120 teachers in Kenai Peninsula. We're losing another 100 or 160 in Kenai and another 120 in the Matsu. And I guarantee you, it's not just them. Those are just the ones I was able to find in the local paper. Another thing I saw when I was reading national or statewide coverage of this topic, the principal, I wasn't able to find Ketchikan's numbers of displaced teachers and layoffs, but I found something even more upsetting. I found a quote from the high school principal of Ketchikan High School. He was testifying to Senate Education, and he said this. He said, um, he's seeking employment in Oregon. And I'm going to quote him. He said, in Oregon, I can get a defined benefit package. I can have higher wages. I can have a lower cost of living. We want to stay. I want to stay, but we're also highly educated professionals. And I can tell you, there's a lot of options out there, from superintendent all the way down to our kindergarten teacher. People have options. And if the legislature does not fulfill its constitutional duty to adequately fund the schools, Matsu will lose 120 teachers. Kenai will lose 120 teachers. ASD is going to have 380 fewer teachers. This is not an ASD issue. This is a statewide failure, and it's not a secret. I completely understand if you as a parent, this is new to you because you're just getting engaged in the conversation, but there's no excuse for the legislators that have heard us talk about this topic. Myself, I've talked about it for about 3 years, but collectively, we've probably been talking about it for closer to a decade. And it's in one ear, out the other. We have some of the most passionate legislators that I've ever met in my life here in Alaska. But as a body, there's been the lack of political will, not just for 1 or 2 years. We're talking 10 years. We're almost talking an entire cohort of school-aged children who are the real people who are losing out because of this political inaction. So I do have a couple of more things that I want to say before I open it up to question. It is not too late. Do not let any legislator or anybody outside of this room tell you that it's too late. There is no excuse to not take action today in the legislature or this week at minimum, because here's the deal. Here's the bottom line that I want you to remember from this. Every day that passes without action from the legislature is a day that ASD can't hire teachers. It's a day that Matsu cannot hire one of those 120 teachers that they're about to lose. It's another day that Kenai cannot hire the 160 teachers that they're about to lose. Every single day matters. And I can tell you, as somebody who was once the chief of HR for one of the largest school systems in the country, that now is the time to hire teachers. Not in June, not in July. By July, any teacher worth their salt will be in a contract with the district that wants them, that wants to invest in their pensions, that wants to invest in their salaries, that wants to invest in the future of their economy and their workforce. This is so much bigger than just ASD and education. This is really taking a blind eye to what Alaska can be if we choose to invest in our people, if we choose to make a promise to them as a state to say that if you choose to be here in Alaska, we have your back. We have your back up until from birth to your honorable retirement. That's the promise that people want to hear when they're looking for places to go to school or when they're looking for places to live in the long term. So it's no surprise that the group that's leaving in the highest numbers are our young people. Our young people who are the ones most likely to have children in the district. That's what's accelerating the school closure crisis, not just in ASD, but all across the state. And it's not going to stop until there's some action and decision making from the very top, from the governor down. We need to have an awakening. Our eyes need to be open because this reality is unacceptable. And I can tell you this, if I heard from the governor today what the floor is in terms of what he'd be willing to invest in, if I heard from the legislature today that they're willing to push a bill like House Bill 69 forward, we'd be starting to hire teachers today. I'd be telling my chief of HR to be looking at all of the surrounding states in the Pacific Northwest so we can make the case to every single new and emerging teacher to come take a chance on ASD. We're the place you want to be. But the problem is that when you Google Alaska right now, you see all these articles around a lack of political will to invest in our people. We see school closures. We see these budget issues. We need to invest in ourselves. That's the bottom line. And unfortunately, I'm just not seeing that, but I have to hold on to hope. And you in the audience and you listening to me are part of the hope. It does not have to end here, but what does have to happen is they need to hear from people other than me. They've heard from me. I think they're tired of hearing from me. I probably don't blame them, but they need to hear from you as constituents, right? Like they need to hear from everyday families who are sick and tired of not knowing whether or not that their middle school sports is going to be available the next year. That's all we want. As superintendents, we're not looking for luxury, admission-free school buses or Maserati school buses. The only thing that superintendents want is to know what their budget is in January so we can look at the test scores and budget in the areas where we need to invest in growth. That's literally all that superintendents ask for, but that's not what they'll tell you if you ask them what superintendents want, but that's the truth. We just want to be able to plan in advance so we can target our dollars towards the areas that your kids need to grow. So that's the frustration. That's where we're at. And I have one more thing to say is that, again, this is not an operational crisis. This is a legislative crisis. And those are the people that we need to talk to today. So here's the thing. People are going to say left and right that there's a lot of reasons why House Bill 69 is not the bill that we should be investing in. Do your research. Please look at House Bill 69 as it is and decide that for yourself. Don't let them tell you whether or not House Bill 69 is the right thing. I'm talking about it only because that seems to be the major vehicle that's in play. But a lot of people are saying things like House Bill 69 is not aligned to policy reforms. It's not aligned to the changes needed to have gains in academic achievement. Let me tell you something. As somebody that's been superintendent here for going on my 4th year, somebody that's been in education my entire career, let me tell you exactly what House Bill 69 is going to get ASD, because I want to shout out the school board that passed a visionary amendment that left no ambiguity as to how House Bill 69 can transform ASD and position us to be the leader that we are in the state. If House Bill 69 passes, the ASD board has already voted on that we'll restore class sizes back to what they were in 2016. That's a guarantee. If House Bill 69 passes, we're going to have high-dose tutoring for our students who are not proficient at reading. If House Bill 69 passes, we'll be able to restore our Ignite program. You won't have to worry about gifted programming. You won't have to worry about middle school and high school sports because that will already be budgeted as soon as House Bill 69 passes. If you're a parent of a correspondence kid, if House Bill 69 passes, I hope they told you that your allotment will probably rise because we'll be able to finally make allotments commensurate with the base student allocation. That's a positive for our correspondence families. Let's say you're a charter school family. Did you know that House Bill 69 will actually help your charter school thrive for the long term? One of the top performing charter schools in the country rather, was in a lease close to $1 million a year. And ASD took decisive action to give them a home so they don't have to worry about that $1 million. I wish we had more buildings to offer more programs. But if the state doesn't do something, there are a lot of people out there that say through one part of their mouth that, oh, I'm pro-charter school. But they don't actually want to help these charter schools get out of their expensive, sometimes prohibitively expensive leases that will frankly put them towards insolvency. ASD has put our money and our time where our mouth is when it comes to serving our correspondence students, our charter school students, and our neighborhood schools. And there's no ambiguity and frankly no excuses for a legislator to not consider passing House Bill 69. If you're looking for reforms that are aligned to, the things that are tied to improving academic outcomes, that's smaller class sizes. That's high-dose tutoring. That's a nurse in your school. That's not compromising your Montessori or optional model because some elected official didn't have the political will to invest what our students need in their schools. There's no excuse. So when you talk to legislators, and I hope you do, it's not my role to tell you what to say, but a good place to start is to tell them how you feel. Because if you feel anything like me, you're tired of inaction. You're tired of people skirting around the truth. And you're tired of people obscuring the math to make us believe that something other than House Bill 69 will improve academic outcomes, when I can attest that there's nothing that will improve academic outcomes more than lower class sizes for our kids and awesome programs like Ignite and great programs that we have in our optional programs and our correspondence programs and charter schools. We as a school board administration know exactly what we need to do to improve academic outcomes. It's spelled out in our amendment that's tied directly to House Bill 69. So my question to the legislature is, when are you going to pass it? That's what I want to know. And if you want to know that, I would ask them too. They need to hear from every single one of us, because only together will we finally, after years of inaction, take a step in the right direction.